The United Nations sits proudly on a 17-acre Rockefeller Purchase block of prime oceanfront New York City real estate. It is one of those states within a state. It occupies international territory, having its own flag, post office, stamps, and its own 6 official languages. It spreads its global control over the world through its myriad of organizations and groups. It is a CFR-produced entity in which die-hard communists, neocon capitalists, and New Age Luciferians combine their finely tuned skills of manipulation and control to reshape the world into a new world order. According to Earl Browder, once General Secretary of the Communist Party, USA, he stated that the American communists worked energetically and tirelessly to lay the foundations for the United Nations, which we were sure would come into existence. There were Soviet communists at work both openly and secretly in the establishment of the UN. Alger Hiss, Harry White, and Virginius Coe, to mention just a few. The first Secretary General of the UN was Norwegian Trygve Lie, who served in the post from 46 to 52. He held a high position in Norway's Social Democratic Labour Party, an offshoot of the Communist International. From 53 to 61, Sweden's Dag Hammarskjöld served as Secretary General. He called Communist China's mass murderer Chou En-lai his hero. Burma's U Thant followed from 61 to 71. Thant praised Vladimir Lenin, saying that his goals were in line with the aims of the UN Charter. From 72 to 81, Austria's Kurt Waldheim held the post. He had been a Nazi officer and was also an admirer of Chou En-lai. Peru's Javier Pérez de Cuellar held the position from 82 to 91. As a Marxist, he had called for the redistribution of the world's wealth. From 92 to 96, it was Egypt Boutros Ghali. While in office, he had called for an end to absolute and exclusive sovereignty. Kofi Annan of Ghana held the post from 97 to 2006. Known for his consistent attacks on the very concept of national sovereignty, he was accused of complicity in the massacres occurring in Europe's Bosnia and Africa's Rwanda. South Korea's Ban Ki-moon held office from 2007 to 16. He pushed hard for the goals of Agenda 21 and 2030. The UN Security General is now Antonio Guterres, former socialist Portuguese Prime Minister. Before this, he was the president of Socialist International, a global network of national socialist parties seeking to establish democratic socialism around the world. So we see the open communist control of this organization which runs the Western democratic-loving world. It has been compared to an octopus with many arms and tentacles, which spreads itself across the entire world and sucks the living daylights out of everything good and healthy and right. Like all other Illuminati-controlled front groups, it hides its true intentions behind lies, which to the undiscerning sound wonderfully charitable and compassionate and worthy. John F. Hyland, former mayor of New York City, explained, "The real menace of our republic," he said, "is the invisible government, which like a giant octopus sprawls its slimy legs over our cities, states, and nation. The little coterie of powerful international bankers virtually run the United States government for their own selfish purposes. They practically control both parties and control the majority of the newspapers and magazines in this country. They use the columns of these papers to club into submission or drive out of office public officials who refuse to do the bidding of the powerful corrupt cliques which compose the invisible government. It operates under cover of a self-created screen and seizes our executive offices, legislative bodies, schools, courts, newspapers, and every agency created for the public protection. Agenda 21 and 2030 are the means to enforce global compliance. World Federalists of the UN tell us that the environmental crisis facing the Earth is a global problem and therefore calls for a global solution. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortage, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself, said the Council of the Club of Rome in 1991. CFR Lincoln Bloomfield said that the world needs a crisis, a war, or a brink of war situation so grave or commonly menacing that deeply rooted attitudes and practices are sufficiently shaken to open the possibility of a revolution in world political arrangements. Not everyone agrees with this official narrative. Art Robinson, co-founder of the Oregon Institute of Science and Medicine, says, "Nowhere is science more abused than in the United Nations, where institutionalized mob rule is called science. In its headlong drive to gain the power to tax and ration world energy and thereby control world technology, sharing taxation, authority with other governments in return for their support, the United Nations has created a process which it calls science." 17 Sustainable Development Goals with their 169 target indicators are known as Agenda 2030. They build on Agenda 21 and take it to new extreme heights. Sea level rising, more frequent and intense natural disasters, spiraling conflict, violent extremism, and natural resource depletion, we are told in this document, are the new normal of the 21st century. Agenda 2030 calls for an end to world poverty. Sounds good, but the mechanism for this goal to be achieved is through wealth redistribution. Wealth redistribution does not end poverty. It destroys the middle class and their wealth and their incentive to work hard and take personal responsibility and pride in their efforts. It makes everyone poor. It wants to end hunger and improve education and promote women's rights. By constantly creating a gender war, families are broken and men are blamed for everything and feminized. Women rule and senseless socialist principles are applied because of feminine compassion. It calls for the takeover and management of all natural resources, air, land, sea, water, and agriculture. Ever since Tesla was sidelined and forgotten, the power brokers of the world have controlled the energy markets. Do not for 1 minute think that this switch from fossil fuels to renewables is anything but a carefully contrived market with a publicly approved face. Smart grids with smart meters will go on everything with peak pricing for maximum profits. People will all gladly accept load sharing and reduced and monitored use all in the name of smart, clean, green living. It wants everyone to be employed, to live in urban smart cities, to use regulated infrastructure for increased surveillance, and push artificially created scarcity for worldwide rationing and control. It wants to control our consumption, stating that we all have and use too much. It will take away private property and agriculture, gun rights and private health care. Mass immigration and clashing cultures will produce the necessary conflict needed to make people willing to give up democracy for totalitarian dictatorship which promises them peace. The plan is to engineer a radical shift in thinking from the biblical and anthropomorphic worldview, where God is seen as the creator and the world was made for man, to an ecocentric one which is based on evolution and which sees the environment as having greater value than the individual. The agenda is continuously calling for the individual and the nations to make sacrifices for the good of the environment, but to the destruction and harm of society. We see this shift in law where earth jurisprudence gives legal rights to rivers, forests, and animals. They are protected from man's use by law. But there is also a deeper spiritual motivation behind all this, and this is by far the more powerful driving force of the agendas and the UN. Alice Bailey and her 32nd degree Freemason husband Foster Bailey are foundational figures in the spiritual direction of the UN. Alice Bailey, student of Helena Blavatsky, taught that according to the Ascended Masters, the world needed to be prepared for the arrival of the Christ figure. According to them, Buddha, Krishna, Jesus Christ, Confucius, and Muhammad were all way showers, trying to guide humanity through our spiritual evolution to the next evolutionary level. The goal of the New Age movement, Bailey wrote, has consistently been to bring in the Age of Aquarius, when all will recognize the God within themselves. She and her husband founded the Lucifer Publishing Company of the UN in 1922, later changing it to the Lucis Trust for the purpose of publishing all her occult books. They also created World Goodwill, an organization within the UN aimed at building world unity through a global religion in order to prepare the world for the coming of the New Age Christ. They started the Arcane School to teach these occult New Age heresies such as cosmic evolution, universal consciousness, pantheism, and the divinity of man. Her great invocation is a prayer given to her from her demonic master and is printed in the front of all her books and publications. It is to be said out loud with full intent of the heart by as many people as possible, and most especially on the full moon in May. Bailey organized the Triangles program, which attempts to facilitate groups of 3 to connect in meditation around this great invocation. Understanding that she and her writings provide the basis of UN policy and spiritual direction, consider Bailey's 10-point plan. It concentrates on the elimination of God and all biblical understanding from society. It seeks to destroy the family and morality and to promote feminism, sexual liberty, abortion, and the gay lifestyle. This is what guides the policies of the UN. An occult meditation room is the New Age chapel of the UN. It is a dimly lit room, trapezoidal in shape, with a large black, crystalline iron ore altar in the center. Moving from dark to light is reference to the initiate as he moves from the spiritual ignorance or profanity of the ignorant into the illuminated state of Lucifer's light. The trapezoid is a powerful shape in calling and housing demonic powers. A concrete pillar connects the altar to the ground below, bringing Earth's magnetism into the room. A cubic-style mural at the back, painted by Bo Besco, is aimed to draw the viewer into an altered state of consciousness. The painting on the wall of the Security Council at the UN adds to the spiritual narrative of the coming New Age kingdom on Earth. It is a post-apocalyptic mural, portraying future world events from an occult perspective, painted by Norwegian artist Per Krogh. The essence of the idea is to give an impression of light, security, and joy. The world we see in the foreground is collapsing, while the new world based on clarity and harmony can be built up, explained Krogh himself in 1950. He added, "Thus must the work of the UN and the Security Council provide the seeds for a new and more valuable life." The phoenix represents the dying god that rises from the ashes and completes the capstone of the Illuminati pyramid. It is the Antichrist New World Order taking over the nations. World government, the New World Order, is the goal of Freemasonry, writes Henry Macau. Order is created out of chaos. It will be achieved by a dialectical process or phony wars caused by false flag operations, brainwashing, sensitivity training, propaganda, slander, and coercion. Other important UN people with deep occult beliefs include Arthur Balfour, the Prime Minister of England, who was instrumental in establishing the First League of Nations, which formed the basis of the UN Charter. He was also president of the SPR, the Society for Psychical Research. He held seances in his home and initiated a group called the Synthetic Society, whose goal was to create a one-world religion. Winston Churchill said the creation of an authoritative world order is the ultimate aim towards which we must strive. He was a member of the occult Freemasons and a Master Mason at Studholme Lodge, London. Dr. Robert Mueller was former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations. He said, "We must move as quickly as possible to a one-world government, a one-world religion under a one-world leader." The Robert Mueller School World Core Curriculum Manual of 1986 was published by the Lucis Publishing Company. The preface says, "The underlying philosophy upon which the Robert Mueller School is based will be found in the teachings set forth in the books of Alice A. Bailey by the Tibetan teacher Dwal Kul." On page 58 of this guidebook for teachers for the UN, Mueller writes, "It is frequently the family that infects the child with extreme nationalism. The school should therefore use the means described above to combat family values." He closely followed the teachings of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a Jesuit priest. What I am proposing to do, Teilhard has written, is to narrow the gap between pantheism and Christianity by bringing out what one might call the Christian soul of pantheism, or the pantheist aspect of Christianity. Hindu Sri Chinmoy held twice weekly meditations at the UN, and this continued from 1970 for several decades. Occultists believe that there will be a day when Lucifer comes to earth as the Christ and rules humanity in a new age of occult spirituality. They are trying to prepare the world for his appearing. That is why we see what can only be called an occult initiation of society on a worldwide level. People are being brought into the mysteries. Everyone wears Baphomet t-shirts and upside-down crosses and goes to yoga and does meditation. Children have unicorns on everything. Carolyn Hamlet says that her spirit guides came to her as a child in the form of unicorns. People are being desensitized to biblical truth and awakened to previously hidden occult symbols and practices. Through the UN Society, people are being systematically indoctrinated into an escalating and never-ending war of children against parents, women against men, blacks against whites, poor against rich, left against right, nation against nation, religion against religion, and most importantly, people against nature. These are all part of a carefully engineered Hegelian crisis of polarization, and the UN will offer mankind the solution of peace and cooperation. The pain of compromise and sacrifice will appear to most people to be less than the overwhelming pain of sustained conflict. The New World Order will be the solution, and as we have been told, it will be enforced by the rule of law. You will not be able to resist, even if you want to. The true Christ of the Bible is the only one who can protect you from what lies ahead. Make sure you know him. Make sure your name is written in his book of life. Make sure you have laid your sins before his cross and received his forgiveness and new life. As evil as the plans of the wicked are for this world, God has promised that all things work together for good to them who are the called according to his purpose.